All right, folks. So, if you decide that you want to focus on sound, there are a couple specific things that you could decide to work on. So, the checklist talks about first, look at what you've already done. And I want to emphasize this because without even knowing it, sometimes when you are crafting lines and phrases, you will naturally be thinking of sound. So, first start off by looking at the sounds that you've already created in the poem. Then from there, you want to ask yourself a couple questions because there's a couple paths that you could choose to go down. First, when you read the poem out loud, is there a flow? Now, you've seen this in some of the poetry performances where it almost feels like the poet is creating a certain pattern of when they want to. It just kind of almost feels like it's a song or a rap of some type. So, could my reader point out specific moves I made related to how certain words or sounds are put together? Is there a flow? Next, should my poem have particular rhymes? Now, I want to start off by saying, I'm not a rhyming person. It does not come sort of naturally to me when I write poetry. But for some of you, this is something that you love to do, and sort of the challenge of creating rhymes sparks sort of motivation or engagement for you, in which case I would say absolutely go for it. So maybe for you, it's going to be small moments of rhyming. Maybe it's within one line. Maybe you choose certain stanzas to rhyme or certain lines to rhyme. And maybe you decide you want to put together a rhyme scheme and you want your poem to follow that rhyming pattern throughout the whole poem. You really have a lot of choice here. Next, the sound devices that we really emphasized other than rhyming was alliteration. And alliteration is just like that repeated beginning sound. And this is one that I really sort of connect with when it comes to poetry. And I'm going to show you, going back into my poem, there were a lot of moves that I naturally made. And then there were some that I had to intentionally craft. So the first is that naturally going back, I use alliteration. It's something that I like to do, as I said. So I'm going to point out to you a couple places where I did this. First, that jumped out to me when I came down to my daughter. She will run full speed with her head down straight into your belly. When I read this out loud, I like the S and the S. And I think what I might do to emphasize that, sort of like that whoosh of her running with that S sound, she will run. I might take this with her head down, full speed straight into your belly. That emphasizes the speed and the straight. So just by manipulating the position, I'm now emphasizing the sound. So I already had it in there, I just moved where it was. So it was a little edit to make it a little bit clearer. There was another spot that really stood out to me that I didn't even realize that I put in there to begin with. And that's when I say, you see how cruel kids can be. I really love this because the K sound is kind of a harsh one. And what I'm saying here is sort of a harsh thing because kids can be really awful to each other. So not only is the sound itself emphasizing the idea, the back to back really gives it that extra exclamation point. So that alliteration right there really works well. And then I noticed I did it again. You see how hard almost sounds like breathing hard. So how hard it is to be a kid. Again, I think the sound emphasizes the idea. Now, another idea that you can use, and I put this kind of in the challenge because we haven't really focused on it, is this idea of repetition. And I mentioned it earlier in my sort of message or meaning work that I did, that repeating an idea can sort of emphasize it and make it clearer to the reader because they remember it. But repetition can also work in terms of sound. And I think just the idea of repeating a word or a phrase, you won't always see it at the start, like alliteration. You might see it kind of later. So I want to emphasize right here, She makes crazy eyes, squeezes my cheeks. There's a couple sounds. It almost sounds like a little bit of like a rap there. I've got the ks, I've got the s, I've got the z, I've got the e sound. So, I've created some repetition of sound, even if it's not alliteration. You just hear those sounds over and over, and it emphasizes that moment. So, what I want to say to you is to sort of decide what your approach is. I don't think you should work like alliteration, and I'm going to do a rhyme scheme, and I'm going to throw in like, don't worry about doing everything. I'd say pick maybe one or two of these areas and then go through the poem and very intentionally make some adjustments or make sure you've got something going on there. All right, go give it a shot.